Welcome, Wanderalv Stories. You have stepped into echoed enigmas, where every tale holds a heartbeat and every whisper hides a truth. If these are the stories you've been searching for, subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a secret waiting to be told. Now, take a deep breath and let the echoes
The
begin.
village of Emoyeni, nestled deep within the Drakensberg foothills, was a place of breathtaking beauty, yet a brooding shadow now stretched across its heart. Elder Zola, once respected for his wisdom and strength, had become a man consumed by bitterness. His wife, Nomusa, a woman of gentle spirit and unwavering patience, bore the brunt of his harsh words and cruel gaze. The once vibrant heart they shared now echoed with silence, a heavy quiet born of Zola's discontent and Nomusa's quiet suffering. The other villagers, observing from a respectful distance, whispered of the change in Zola, a man who seemed to forget the meaning of ubuntu. Zola, a proud and unyielding man, believed his wealth and status as an elder granted him dominion over all, even the very air his wife breathed. He saw Nomusa not as a partner, but as an extension of his possessions, a quiet servant whose purpose was to cater to every whim of his. Her quiet resilience, which drew him, now fueled his resentment. He often watched her working in their small field, her back bent, her movements slow with age, and felt only a surging irritation, a desire for something more, something new. His heart, once warm and open, had hardened like the ancient rocks of the mountains surrounding their home. He craved the admiration of younger women, the thrill of perceived freedom from his domestic duties. Nomusa, in his eyes, was a tether, a reminder of his own aging, a burden he increasingly wished to shed. He saw her wisdom as nagging, her patience as weakness, and her quiet devotion as a suffocating demand. One evening, as the sun dipped below the jagged peaks, painting the sky in fiery hues, Zola returned to his hut, a dark resolve firm in his mind. Nomusa offered him a steaming bowl of ujekwe, her eyes downcast, sensing the storm gathering within him. He barely acknowledged her, his gaze fixed on the flickering fire, his thoughts swirling with a terrible plan. The air crackled with an unspoken tension, a foreboding quiet that settled heavily upon their small dwelling.
The next morning, Zola's words cut through the cool dawn air like a sharpened spear. He commanded Nomusa to accompany him on a pilgrimage to the sacred highest peak, a place reserved for elders to commune with the ancestors. His tone offered no room for dissent, his eyes glinting with a cold, unsettling light. Nomusa, her heart a heavy stone in her chest, knew this was no ordinary journey. She gathered her shawl, her hands trembling slightly, and followed him in silent dread, her instincts screaming of impending danger. The climb was arduous, the path winding precariously along the sheer cliffs. Zola walked ahead, his pace relentless, never once looking back to see if Nomusa struggled. The thin air bit at their lungs, and the vastness of the landscape stretched out around them, an indifferent witness to their silent procession. Nomusa's legs ached, her breath came in ragged gasps, but she pushed onward, a silent prayer forming on her lips, a plea to the spirits of the mountains. As they neared the summit, the wind howled around them, a mournful lament. Zola paused at the very edge of the towering cliff, a place where the world seemed to fall away into an endless abyss. He turned to Nomusa, his face a mask of chilling indifference. "This is where our journey ends," he declared, his voice devoid of emotion, the words colder than the mountain air. A shiver, colder than any wind, ran down Nomusa's spine. Nomusa's heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic drum against the silence. She looked into Zola's eyes, searching for any flicker of the man she had once loved, but found no barren landscape of cruelty. Tears welled, blurring the majestic view as the realization of his true intent crashed over her. With a sudden forceful shove, Zola pushed her and she stumbled, falling into the vast empty space, her silent scream swallowed by the wind.
As Nomusa plummeted, a profound calm washed over her. It was not a surrender to death, but a deep connection to something ancient, something eternal. The wind that had moments before howled in despair now seemed to carry voices, soft and resonant, speaking in the old tongue. These were the whispers of the Amadlozi, the revered ancestors, stirring from their eternal slumber, roused by the injustice witnessed on their sacred mountain. She felt a strange lightness, a sense of being caught, not by rough hands, but by an unseen current of energy. Her fall slowed, the rush of air turning into a gentle embrace. Below, the sharp rocks and unforgiving earth seemed to recede, replaced by a shimmering, translucent veil. The Amadlozi, their presence unseen but profoundly felt, had intervened. They would not allow such a heinous act to desecrate their hallowed ground, nor would they permit the violation of Ubuntu to go unpunished. Zola, watching from the cliff edge, saw her disappear. A chilling satisfaction flickered across his face, quickly replaced by a faint look of distress, rehearsed for his return to the village. He believed his heinous act was complete, the burden lifted, and his path to a new life clear. He carefully retraced his steps, planning his story, already constructing the tale of an unfortunate accident, a tragic slip on the treacherous path. But as he descended, a low, guttural hum vibrated through the earth beneath his feet. The air grew heavy, thick with an unseen presence. The rocks seemed to shift and groan, and the very trees along the path swayed unnaturally, despite the absence of wind. Zola, usually stoic, felt a prickle of unease, a cold sensation that snaked up his spine, a feeling he quickly dismissed as the residual chill of the mountain. He did not yet understand the true power of the Amadlozi, nor the depth of their watchful gaze.
Zola returned to Emoyeni, his face a mask of sorrow, his story of Nomusa's tragic fall carefully crafted. The villagers, though saddened, offered their condolences, respecting the elder's grief. Yet, a few observant eyes, particularly those of young Temba, noticed a subtle shift in Zola's demeanor. There was a dryness in his eyes, a calculated precision in his words that spoke more of performance than genuine anguish. That night, as Zola slept fitfully in his now empty hut, a new presence entered his life. It was a subtle shift in the shadows, a faint whisper that seemed to echo his own thoughts, a cold breath on the back of his neck even when no window was open. He would wake with a start, convinced someone stood over him, only to find the hut empty, save for the oppressive silence. He tried to dismiss it as the echoes of his conscience, or perhaps the mountain winds playing tricks. The presence grew bolder. Objects in his hut would shift, seemingly on their own. A gourd of water would be knocked over, a blanket pulled from his sleeping form. One evening, he found his ancestral spear, usually leaning against the wall, laid meticulously across his bed, its point aimed directly at his heart. Panic began to gnaw at him, a cold dread that no amount of rationalization could dispel. He knew, deep down, this was no ordinary haunting. He sought counsel from Mfundo, the village Sangoma, hoping for a cleansing ritual. Mfundo,
a wise and perceptive woman, looked at Zola with knowing eyes. "The spirits are restless, Elder Zola," she said, her voice low. "They speak of an imbalance, a great wrong. The Amadlozi are not pleased." Zola dismissed her warnings, believing Mfundo was simply exploiting his grief. He refused the cleansing, convinced his own strength would overcome any superstitious fears.
Zola's defiance of Mfundo's warnings only intensified the ethereal disturbances. The unseen presence was no longer content with subtle shifts. During the day, in broad daylight, he would hear Nomusa's soft singing, her familiar melodies drifting from the empty fields where she once worked. He would rush out, expecting to see her, only to find the fields barren, the silence mocking his frantic search. The villagers, noticing his increasingly agitated state, began to exchange uneasy glances. At night, the whispers grew into audible warnings, distinct voices speaking his name, recounting his darkest thoughts, reminding him of his cruel act. He tried to ignore them, to drown them out with loud drumming and songs, but the voices were relentless, piercing through the noise. They spoke of Ubuntu neglected, of the sacred bond broken, of the justice demanded by the Amadlozi. His sleep became a torture, plagued by vivid dreams of falling, of grasping hands that pulled him into an abyss. His once hearty appetite vanished. The food tasted like ash, the water like bitter tears. He grew gaunt, his eyes hollow and haunted, a stark contrast to the robust elder he once was. The villagers, seeing his physical and mental deterioration, began to avoid him, fearing the dark energy that now clung to him like a shroud. Even the children, usually drawn to his stories, now shied away, sensing the malevolence that emanated from him. One evening, as he sat alone, consumed by fear, a gust of wind swept through his hut, extinguishing the fire. In the sudden darkness, a spectral image of Nomusa appeared before him, not as a frail old woman, but as a luminous, powerful figure, her eyes burning with an ancestral light. She did not speak, but her presence radiated an overwhelming sorrow and a firm, unyielding judgment. Zola, for the first time, felt true, unadulterated terror and a chilling understanding that he could not escape his fate.
The vivid apparition of Nomusa shattered Zola's last vestiges of composure. He stumbled out of his hut, his cries of terror echoing through the night, a sound that sent shivers down the spines of the sleeping villagers. They emerged from their homes, torches in hand, and found him cowering, babbling incoherently about spirits and ancestral wraith. The sight of their once proud elder reduced to such a state confirmed their worst fears. The Amadlozi had indeed forsaken him. From that night on, the community of Emoyeni enacted a silent yet profound withdrawal. No one brought him food, no one sought his counsel, or no one even met his gaze. His hut, once a hub of village life, became an island of isolation, surrounded by a sea of unspoken condemnation. The warmth of Ubuntu, the lifeblood of their community, was systematically denied to him. He was alive, yet completely alone, a living ghost within his own village. His attempts to reconnect, to explain away the hauntings, were met with stoic silence or averted eyes. He tried to participate in communal events, but the circles of villagers would subtly part, leaving him standing awkwardly on the periphery, an outcast. The children, who loved his tales, now ran from him, their mothers pulling them close. The weight of his isolation became an unbearable burden, heavier than any physical task. One day, Zola approached his closest friend, Duma, a man with whom he had shared countless sunsets and shared many hunts. Duma, his face edged with sorrow, simply shook his head. "Elder Zola," he said, his voice heavy with regret, "you have forgotten Ubuntu. You pushed your own wife from the cliff. The ancestors witnessed it, and now the community must reflect their judgment. Zola finally understood the true depth of his ostracization, a punishment far more agonizing than any physical pain. Desperate and broken, Zola returned to Mfundo, the Sangoma, his pride utterly shattered. He collapsed at her feet, tears streaming down his gaunt cheeks, confessing his terrible crime, the murder of Nomusa. His voice was a raw, choked whisper, filled with a remorse that finally felt genuine. Mfundo listened patiently, her eyes filled with both sorrow and a stern understanding of the profound spiritual debt he had incurred. "The Amadlozi are powerful, Elder Zola," Mfundo stated, her voice calm but firm. "They have shown you the emptiness of a life without ubuntu. They have shown you the true meaning of isolation. Your repentance is a beginning, but the path to forgiveness is long and arduous. It requires more than words. It requires action, a profound restoration of the balance you so recklessly disturbed." She explained that the only way to appease the ancestors and begin his journey towards redemption was to publicly acknowledge his sin before the entire community, and then to undertake a perilous quest. He had to return to the sacred cliff, not to escape, but to seek a specific, rare mountain flower that only bloomed under the light of the full moon. This flower, she explained, was imbued with the spirit's restorative energy. Zola, despite his terror of the cliff, agreed without hesitation. The prospect of facing the mountain again, the scene of his crime, filled him with dread, but the hope of reconnection, of finding a path back to humanity, outweighed his fear. He understood that this quest was not just for a flower. It was a journey into the depths of his own soul, a confrontation with the consequences of his actions, and a desperate plea for the ancestors' mercy. Under the luminous gaze of the full moon, Zola began his ascent to the sacred cliff. This time, the climb was different. There was no cruel haste, no disdain for the path. Each step was deliberate, heavy with repentance. He felt the watchful eyes of the Amadlozi, not with terror, but with a humble acceptance of their judgment. He reached the precipice, the wind whipping around him, not with mournful cries, but with a cleansing force. There, nestled precariously on a rocky ledge, illuminated by the moonlight, bloomed a single, delicate mountain flower, its petals a soft, ethereal blue. It seemed to pulse with a gentle light, a beacon of hope in the desolate landscape. Zola carefully, reverently plucked the flower, his hands trembling, not from fear, but from a profound sense of awe and a dawning understanding of grace. He returned to Emoyeni, the sacred flower clutched in his hand. He presented it to Mfundo, who smiled, a rare warmth in her eyes. The next morning, before the entire village, Zola confessed his crime, his voice clear and resonant, not with shame, but with genuine remorse. He spoke of Nomusa's gentle spirit, of his own arrogance, and of the profound lesson the ancestors had taught him about Ubuntu. The villagers, witnessing his true transformation, slowly began to thaw. The silent condemnation receded, replaced by a cautious acceptance. Zola, humbled and forever changed, dedicated his remaining years to serving his community, teaching the young about the importance of Ubuntu, ensuring that Nomusa's spirit and the lessons of the Amadlozi would never be forgotten. His goal, to rid himself of Nomusa, had been tragically achieved, but his success was ultimately tied to the horrific consequence of his lack of Ubuntu, which led to his deep repentance and ultimate, albeit painful, redemption. And so the winds of the Drakensberg carried not just the cries of a fallen woman, but the ancient whispers of the Amadlozi, resounding through the heart of a Moyeni. They reminded Elder Zola, and indeed all who would listen, that a life devoid of ubuntu is a barren landscape, isolating the spirit even amidst the most vibrant community. For though a man may cast away his dearest companion in his earthly greed, the ties that bind us to one another and to the ancestors are woven with threads stronger than any ambition. The true measure of a man is not in what he takes, but in the humanity he gives. For without it, even a king is but a lonely ghost. Let this tale serve as a guiding star, reminding us that forgiveness blooms only in the soil of genuine repentance, and that the spirit of Ubuntu is the very breath of life itself. 5 key takeaways. 1. The importance of Ubuntu. The story fundamentally emphasizes that humanity towards others and the interconnectedness of community are paramount. 2. Consequences of cruelty. Zola's actions demonstrate that cruelty, particularly towards loved ones, leads to profound personal suffering and spiritual isolation. Ancestral justice. The Amadlozi, ancestors, play an active role in enforcing moral principles and ensuring that justice, even if spiritual, is served. 4. Redemption through humility. True redemption is only possible through genuine remorse, public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and a humble willingness to undertake challenging paths to atone. 5. Community as a moral compass. The village's initial condemnation and subsequent cautious acceptance of Zola highlight the role of community in upholding ethical standards and influencing individual moral transformation.
And so, another echo fades into silence. For now, what truth did this story whisper to your heart? Share it with us in the comments below, for your words are what keep these echoes alive. If you haven't yet, subscribe and ring the bell. Let your heart be ready, for the next secret we uncover is never far away. This has been Echoed Enigmas, where every ending is simply a new beginning.